Hello everybody, it's Bruce at Groxio Learning, and I'm here to talk to you about Mix. That's the tool that's responsible for building and working with your development environment from an Elixir perspective. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm in the command line and I have Elixir installed, which means that I also have Mix. So let's see what tasks are available. So I'm going to type Mix help. And these are all the development time tasks that I can type. Clean will basically clean out the compiled version. Compile will let me build a version. Mix deps gives me some commands and subcommands, like for example, deps.get will fetch my dependencies and so on and so forth. We just called help. And then also this is the place that we'll use to run tests or create a new project. So let's create a new project now. So I'm going to create, that already exists. So I'm going to create a new project as a place for mixed tasks. So I'm going to change into the task directory, and now I can start IEX in the context of my application. So now I've started up, and let's start to explore a little bit what we have with Mix. So I just typed hmix, which gives me the module documentation for Mix. And you can see that there's some information in here about how to start things up. What I'm really interested in doing, though, is creating a mixed task. So let's get help on that. Okay, so now we know, we just called H for mixed task, and this basically walks us through a typical mixed application. And it gave us this skeleton, which is nice. In a second, we'll go ahead and create this echo mixed task, and then we'll kind of play with it a little bit to see what's happening. And you can see that this uses mixed task, which announces our intention to do mixed task like things. And you can see that this module has to start with mixed tasks, otherwise Mix won't know how to find your task, and then the name of the task. And then there's a single API in here called run, and it takes one argument, and it's basically going to be passed a string with the command line arguments. So that's probably a pretty good place to start. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to open up an editor. So now I have an editor. And you can see that I have my lib directory, and there's this tasks file, and this is the one that was created by Mix when we created the project. What I really want, though, is another folder called Mix, and then in here I want a folder called tasks. And so I'm going to build a module, the one that I want. So maybe we want a word size. So let's call this thing a counter. I think that this is EX. Yeah, let's see. So I think that that this is actually a compiled feature. So EX, so an EX extension means it's a compiled file. EXS means it's an Elixir compiled file. EXS means it's an Elixir script. Let's go ahead and live with this one now. And I'm going to rename this. So I'm going to rename it. This is going to be count. And so we need to call this, So this is the file that was created in our documentation. So since ours is named count, let's call this count here. And this is going to use Mix.Task, which allows me all the access that I need for there's probably some inclusions and things like that. And this says, so impl means that this is a behavior implementation called a Mix.Task. And I'm going to get arguments in, command line arguments in. So I'm basically going to call this words. And so this is a command called mixshell.info, and then it's going to pass the words in. So so this is a list of words. That's probably a pretty good starting place for us. Okay, and so we also have a couple of options that we can add after the fact to create some more documentation. This is a great stopping place for us. Let's take stock. Okay, so we are back and it's time to add some documentation, and there's two types of documentation that are interesting. So the first one is a module doc, and you can get that exactly the way you think. So let's type it first. So I'm going to type module doc, and I'm going to use a here doc, which is basically a triple quote, which will let me have will let me have free-form sentences without worrying about quotes or anything like that. And I'm going to say this allows us to count the words from the command line arguments. And then I'm going to say usage. Maybe I can go ahead and add this up there. That looks okay. So the usage is mix count word 1, word 2, and word 3. And then I might decide to do something a little bit richer if I were actually building a useful task. But let's go ahead and run this thing. And I'm going to say mix count. Okay, so we're still working just fine. And let's look at the module documentation. So I'm going to say mix help count. Okay, and there you see the documentation for the mix count. So, and this is the usage and the word that I looked at, and this is where to find it, where to find the one that they're running. And notice we're not actually seeing the directory structure of our precompiled code. This is seeing the directory structure of our build, which is where the Elixir code is compiled to. So let's look and see what other arguments are available to us. Okay, so I can say, here's the documentation for the thing that we just built. This guy right here. We're in Mix.Task right there. And so you can see that 3 arguments are available for us. Short doc looks promising. This will actually let us show up in the directory when we type mix help. So we'll definitely add that one right before our task. Recursive comes into play for umbrella projects, which are nested Elixir projects. And the preferred environment tag comes into play when we have a special environment that we want our particular task to load. So, things like certain deployment tasks, or a great example is mix test, would always want to run in the test environment. So let's go ahead and drop this one in. So I'm going to say, this is going to be a string, count the length, count the word lengths for command line arguments. That's good. So this is a slightly awkward English phrase, but the reason that I want to start this with account is I want it to line up with the name of the mix task so that it'll be easier to find it. So let's see if this much will work. So I'm going to say mix compile just to make sure everything's building okay. And then I'm going to say mix help. So now I ought to be able to run down to the place where I see yes. And now you can see that my description is in the directory. So that's the way to build a mix task with some documentation. Let me point out one more thing before we end this talk. Sometimes, actually pretty frequently, it's helpful to be able to build tasks for particular that will actually run in a particular environment. And to do so, we actually need to run child OTP processes. And if you're new to Elixir, you might not understand quite what OTP means, but it's basically the way to package up additional applications that depend on other applications. So for example, if we're an Ecto application, we need to start the Ecto repository and connection pool and things like that. So there's a structure that lets us do that. And as always, we're going to do our exploration in the IEX shell. So I'm going to start this, and I'm going to look for mix tasks. And the task that I want is run. And I basically want to get the help for that. And so again, this is all provided with module doc. And so we could scroll up until we see this. And now you can see that this starts the application code. So that's what we're looking for. So mix run and all, so they're all these different tasks, right? And let's see if there's a, and then there are some options like don't halt, and there are a number of options here. There's a magic application that we could run though, and I want to take a look at that. So mix.task. So one of the tasks is mix app tree, and this gives me the OTP tree, but there's also mix app.start. This is a great task to run from inside of your own mix task. So for example, I could say mix.task.run. There's the API that we want right there. There's a version for 1 and 2. And then I could say app.start. And that's actually starting this one right. So we're doing mix.run, and we're actually doing the mix.task.app, this one right here. And that's going to start up all the dependencies, and it's going to do this in a temporary way. And here's how we could see that. .app.start. So we're going to say get the help, and you'll notice so it's going to start by default as temporary, which is normally exactly what we want, because our mix task will start our dependencies, will finish its work, and then will end, which is nice. So now if you're building mix applications, if you're building mix tasks, you can actually use the other OTP applications that your application depends on, and you don't have to start them all. You can start exactly the ones that you need. So in conclusion, we built a task. We put it inside of mix.tasks. We named it the thing that we're going to want to type from the command line. We provided documentation with short doc for the table entry, for the directory entry, and module doc for the task help and the specific task help in Mix, and the specific module help in IEX. And then when we actually ran the task, we actually get a list of command line arguments in here. And if we want to start independent tasks, it's easy to do so right here by running another mix task, which will pick up all the context that you need. That's all we've got for this first Groxio video, and we'll be shouting at you again with Chapter 1 on strings versus binaries versus lists versus chartlist. And I'll see you in just a bit.